Chosen one, you did not stumble onto this moment by accident. You were drawn here by divine appointment, by perfect timing, orchestrated in heaven long before you pressed play. There is a reason your spirit paused, a reason your heart leaned in, a reason this message found you now. The Lord is saying this is not random, this is recognition. You are standing at the edge of a supernatural shift, an unseen alignment, where what you released in purity is about to return in power. Anointed one, heaven has been watching the quiet moments. No one applauded the kindness you showed when you had nothing to gain, the compassion you offered when no one knew your name. And now the scales are tipping. Scripture says in Galatians chapter 6 verse 9 that in due season you shall reap if you do not faint. Chosen one, your due season has arrived. What you thought was ordinary obedience was actually a divine assignment. What felt like a small act was recorded as a massive seed. You are not waiting on luck connections or chance encounters. You are stepping into divine alignment. Expect sudden elevation. Expect favor that makes no sense. Expect doors to open that you never knocked on. Anointed one, prepare your spirit, because what God is about to reveal will confirm that your kindness did not go unnoticed, and your breakthrough is already in motion. Chosen one, let me slow this moment down with you, because what I'm about to say isn't theory, it's truth forged in real life. There are seasons when heaven watches how you move, when no one is watching, when you're tired, overlooked, stretched thin, and still choosing to show up with integrity. This is one of those moments being spoken back to you now. You've probably replayed certain encounters in your mind, wondering why you felt so strongly led to help someone, speak to someone, or stay present when it would have been easier to withdraw. At the time it felt small, ordinary, almost inconvenient. But in the unseen, it was seismic. You gave from a place that was already depleted. You showed compassion when you yourself needed rescue. And that anointed one is the kind of obedience that opens vaults you didn't even know existed. I want you to hear this clearly. Heaven does not measure giving the way the world does. The world looks at amounts, visibility, applause. Heaven looks at cost. Heaven looks at motive. Heaven looks at what it took out of you to do what you did. I've lived long enough to know that the hardest kindness to give is the one you offer while you're silently bleeding. When your own prayers feel unanswered, when your own future feels uncertain, and still something in you says, help anyway, love anyway, stay anyway. That's not personality, that's assignment. That's the quiet voice of God, nudging you towards something bigger than the moment in front of you. Chosen one. The reason that moment mattered so much is because you weren't just being nice. You were interrupting something. You stepped into a space where someone else was unraveling, even if they didn't show it. People with influence often carry invisible weights. I've seen it firsthand. The higher the platform, the lonelier the room. The more resources someone has, the harder it is for them to trust intention. And without knowing who they were, you gave them the rarest thing on earth, sincerity, without agenda. You didn't treat them like a stepping stone. You didn't adjust your tone, your energy, or your posture based on perceived value. You showed up the same way you always do. And that sameness, that consistency of spirit shook them. There are moments in life when God deliberately blinds us to status so he can reveal character. If you had known who they were, you might have overthought it. You might have performed. You might have shrunk or overextended. So God shielded your eyes to protect your obedience. I've learned that when God hides information, it's often mercy. It keeps your spirit pure. It keeps the exchange clean. And because you didn't know you passed a test, you never realized you were taking. Let me tell you something from lived experience. The seeds that feel the most forgettable are often the ones that come back the loudest. I've watched doors open years later because of a conversation I barely remembered. I've seen favor circle back because of kindness I assumed no one noticed. Heaven keeps meticulous records, not of your image, but of your intention. When Scripture says that what is done in secret is rewarded openly, it's not poetry, it's protocol. And right now, Chosen One, the protocol, is activating. Behind the scenes, conversations are unfolding with your name attached to them. Not because you marketed yourself, but because someone couldn't shake the way you made them feel. They're replaying the interaction, not with logic, but with their spirit. They've had access to everything money can buy, and still your presence stood out. That's how you know this isn't about wealth chasing wealth. This is about heaven responding to alignment. God is not about to repay you with noise. He's about to repay you with reversal. The very things you gave away in scarcity are coming back in volume. Peace, stability, favor, access, breakthrough, anointed one. I need you to stay open in this season. Don't downplay what you did. Don't minimize the moment because it felt ordinary. Some of the most powerful shifts in my own life came from decisions I made on tired days when I didn't feel spiritual or strong, just obedient. You don't always feel the weight of obedience when you're in it. You feel it later when the harvest starts knocking. Right now, heaven is recalibrating timelines. What felt delayed is being repositioned. What felt overlooked is being remembered. And the reason this is happening now is because you proved something in private, that your kindness isn't transactional, that your heart doesn't shift based on advantage, that you can be trusted with more. This next season isn't about striving, it's about alignment. Stay grounded, stay receptive, stay humble, because the same God who arranged that encounter is arranging what comes next. And what comes next will make sense of everything that didn't before. Chosen One, let me take you deeper, because what's unfolding now isn't just about one encounter, one person, or one moment of kindness. It's about a pattern heaven has been watching in your life for a long time. There have been repeated moments where you chose integrity, when compromise would have been easier, compassion, when self-preservation made more sense, humility, when pride would have protected you. You didn't always understand why you were wired this way. Sometimes you even questioned if it was costing you too much. But heaven never questioned it. Heaven was marking it. I want you to understand something very important. What you gave them was not emotional, social, or financial. It was spiritual currency. And spiritual currency is rare in rooms filled with power. People with influence are surrounded by performance every day. Smiles with motives, conversations with angles, kindness with conditions. Over time, that environment hardens the heart, not because they want it to, but because discernment becomes survival. So when someone appears without an agenda, it disrupts their internal system. That's what happened when you showed up. Your presence didn't ask, it didn't chase, it didn't shrink, it simply was. And that kind of presence exposes everything fake without saying a word. There's a reason they remember you. It's not because of what you said alone. It's because of how your spirit made them feel safe. Safety is the most expensive thing in the world, and it cannot be bought. You gave them a moment where they didn't have to perform, protect, or posture. For a brief window they could breathe. And Chosen One, when someone who has spent years guarding themselves finally exhales, they never forget who made that possible. I've seen this dynamic play out in real life. People don't always reward what helps them succeed. They reward what helps them survive. You didn't just offer encouragement. You intervened at a moment when something inside them was beginning to fracture. You didn't know it, but you arrived at a crossroads in their inner world, and instead of preaching, fixing, or extracting, you stayed human. That's what slowed the spiral. That's what reintroduced light. That's what made them pause long enough for heaven to step in. This is why the return won't look small. It won't be symbolic. It won't be surface level. When someone powerful realizes they've been touched by something eternal, they don't respond casually. They respond decisively. Not out of guilt, but out of recognition. Their spirit knows they encountered something they cannot manufacture. And when wealth meets reverence, generosity follows naturally. Not because you asked, but because the balance must be restored. Chosen one. I need to say this clearly: do not disqualify yourself from what's coming by thinking you're not ready. Readiness is not about perfection, it's about posture, and your posture has already been proven. You've shown heaven that you can carry weight without becoming bitter, that you can pour without demanding repayment, that you can honor without being seen. Those are the exact traits required for elevation that doesn't destroy you. God does not promote based on talent alone. He promotes based on trust. There are doors opening that you didn't knock on because you were never meant to knock. You were meant to be called. That's the difference between striving and alignment. Striving exhausts you. Alignment surprises you. One day you're minding your business, doing what you've always done, and suddenly access appears. Not because you chased proximity, but because your name was carried there by someone else's testimony. I don't know why they'll say, but there's something about this person, and that will be enough. I want you to stay aware in this season. Pay attention to subtle shifts, invitations that feel different, conversations that come out of nowhere, opportunities that don't require you to prove yourself. That's how heaven moves when it's repaying obedience, quietly, precisely, without drama. The same God who hid their status from you is now revealing your value to the right eyes. And when God reveals you, it's never for exposure alone, it's for positioning. Anointed one, this isn't about you becoming impressed by wealth. It's about wealth becoming humbled by oil. There's a difference. You carry something that cannot be duplicated, trained, or purchased. It was formed in the seasons where you had to rely on God instead of resources. It was refined in moments where you had no leverage but faith. That's why your kindness carried weight. It wasn't learned, it was lived. Right now, the ripple effect is expanding. What started as a single act is now touching multiple rooms. People are being reminded of your name. Favor is being discussed without you present. Alignment is being negotiated without your effort. This is how heaven honors those who honor others without knowing who they're honoring. And here's the part many people miss: the return is not just financial, it's structural. It rearranges your future. It stabilizes what's been shaky. It accelerates what's been delayed. Stay anchored. Stay surrendered. Don't rush ahead of what God is doing. Let it unfold. Let it arrive. Because when the call comes, when the door opens, when the opportunity presents itself, you'll realize something profound. God didn't just reward your kindness. He used it to prepare you for what you're about to steward next. Chosen one. There is another layer to this that you need to recognize, because what you stepped into wasn't accidental kindness. It was divine timing intersecting with spiritual sensitivity. There are moments when God places someone directly in your path, not because of who they are on paper, but because of where they are in their spirit. You happen to meet them at a moment when their outer success could no longer compensate for their inner exhaustion. And the reason you were chosen for that moment is because you have learned how to move through life without hardening your heart. I want you to reflect for a second. Think about how many times you could have closed yourself off because of disappointment, betrayal, or fatigue. How many moments you could have said, "I've given enough," or "I don't have the energy for this." Yet somehow you didn't. Not because you were trying to be noble, but because something in you refuses to become cold. That quality is not accidental. It was forged in pain, refined in waiting, and preserved by grace. And that is exactly why heaven trusted you with that encounter. When you showed up, you weren't just present physically, you were present spiritually. You were grounded, you were centered, you weren't hungry for validation, and you weren't desperate for outcomes. That neutrality of spirit is rare. Most people approach powerful individuals either intimidated or opportunistic. You approached them human to human, and that disarmed them in a way nothing else could. It reminded them of who they were before survival mode took over, before every interaction became a transaction. This is where the shift began. Because when someone has spent years being treated as a resource instead of a person, the smallest act of sincere presence becomes monumental. You didn't know it, but you gave them something they hadn't experienced in a very long time: dignity without expectation. And dignity restores people at a soul level. That's why they couldn't shake you. That's why your face, your tone, your words stayed with them long after the moment ended. Chosen one. Understand this: when you touch someone at the soul level, the response is never shallow. They may not immediately call you, they may not instantly act, but something internal begins to reorganize. Values resurface, priorities realign, questions they've avoided start asking themselves. And when that process begins, the desire to honor the source of that awakening follows naturally, not as charity, as recognition. I've walked through seasons where I later realized I was being positioned, not rewarded. At the time, it felt like I was just doing what was right, staying consistent, staying kind, staying faithful. Only later did I understand that God was setting the stage. That's what's happening with you now. The kindness you showed was not the climax, it was the catalyst. The real movement is unfolding now behind closed doors, in rooms you've never stepped into, through conversations you haven't heard. There are people discussing you who don't even know you yet. They only know the effect you had. And sometimes that's enough. Reputation built through spirit travels faster than reputation built through strategy. This is why you don't need to announce yourself in this season. Let the fruit speak. Let the alignment speak. Let the testimony of how you made someone feel open the door. Anointed one. I want to prepare your heart for this. When the return comes, it may challenge your sense of identity, not because it's too big, but because you've spent so long being the giver, not the receiver. You're used to pouring, supporting, stabilizing. Receiving may feel unfamiliar at first. You may even feel the urge to deflect it, to minimize it, to say, I didn't do that much. But hear me clearly: deflecting the blessing is not humility. It's misunderstanding. When God sends provision back to you, it's not payment, it's positioning. It equips you to continue being who you are without burning out. There is a scripture in principle written throughout the Word that those who refresh others will themselves be refreshed. Not emotionally, structurally, practically, tangibly. God does not allow the wells of those he trusts to run dry. And you have proven trustworthy not by perfection, but by posture. You didn't let hardship turn you inward. You didn't let scarcity make you selfish. You stayed open. And openness is the doorway to overflow. What's coming may not arrive the way you expect. It may not look like a single dramatic moment. It may come as access, as covering, as opportunity that accelerates years of effort. As alignment that removes resistance you've been pushing against for too long. You may look back and realize that one door opening saved you a decade of struggle. That's how God redeems time. Stay aware, chosen one. Don't rush. Don't grasp. Don't try to control the narrative. Let the same spirit that guided you in kindness guide you in reception. You don't need to become louder. You don't need to become different. You simply need to stay aligned. The same authenticity that qualified you for the encounter will qualify you for the elevation. This season is not about becoming someone new. It's about being supported as who you already are. Heaven is not changing you. Heaven is backing you. And when heaven backs someone, the shift is undeniable. Things begin to move with less resistance. Help arrives without begging. Favor shows up without manipulation. And you'll know deep in your spirit that this is not coincidence. It's continuation. What you touched in that moment touched you back. And now the return is in motion. Stay steady. Stay humble, stay receptive. Because what began as kindness is unfolding into alignment, and alignment always leads to increase. Chosen one, as this unfolds, there is a deeper truth you need to hold steady in your spirit, because not every reward announces itself loudly. Some rewards arrive as recognition, others as access, and some as protection from paths you never have to walk again. What is coming toward you now is not random favor. It is targeted. It is precise. It is the kind of elevation that only happens when God is personally involved in the arrangement. You may not have realized it in the moment, but when you encountered them, you were being seen through the eyes of someone who understands power. Not just financial power, but influence, reach, and consequence. People who operate at that level are trained to read rooms, read people, and read intention. They have to. And what they saw in you stopped them. It wasn't charisma. It wasn't confidence. It was weight, spiritual weight. The kind that doesn't come from trying, but from being. There is a reason Scripture speaks so often about oil. Oil cannot be faked. You can imitate skill. You can rehearse speech. You can manufacture image. But oil is carried, not copied. And chosen one, you carry oil. It's why your presence calms situations without effort. It's why people open up to you without knowing why. It's why even in silence you are felt. When you walked into that interaction, you didn't need to announce anything. The oil spoke for you. I've seen this play out in my own life. There were moments when I felt invisible, overlooked, even underestimated. Yet later I discovered that the very people I assumed didn't notice were watching closely. Sometimes the most influential eyes are the quietest. They don't react, they observe, and they remember. That's exactly what happened with you. They may not have responded immediately. They may not have revealed who they were, but they took note. Chosen one. This is why the return will come without you having to explain yourself. When someone of influence recognizes oil, they don't need proof. They don't need persuasion. They trust discernment. And once that discernment locks in, everything shifts. Your name begins to carry weight in rooms you've never entered. Your presence is referenced even when you're not there, and alignment starts moving on your behalf. This isn't about ego. This is about stewardship. God doesn't reveal you to elevate your image. He reveals you to position your purpose. There are doors you are about to walk through that require more than talent. They require trust. They require character. They require someone who won't abuse access or forget where it came from. And your history of quiet obedience is what qualified you. Not the one moment of kindness alone, but the life that made that moment possible. Anointed one. Hear this: sometimes God allows someone powerful to see you before you see yourself clearly. Not to make you dependent on them, but to confirm what heaven has already said about you. You didn't need their validation to be valuable, but their recognition is about to activate provision that aligns with your assignment. This is how God funds purpose. He connects oil with resources so that impact can multiply. You may be tempted in this season to replay the encounter, to analyze what you said, what you did, or what you should have done differently. Let that go. The moment has already served its purpose. What mattered was not perfection, it was presence, and you showed up fully. Now your role is to remain grounded while God handles the return. There's something else you need to understand. When someone with influence recognizes something sacred, they feel a responsibility to protect it. That's why what's coming may look like covering before it looks like cash. Mentorship before money, access before assets. Don't despise that order. Protection is often the first layer of blessing. It shields you from mistakes that cost others years to recover from. I've learned that the most dangerous season in anyone's life is not lack. It's sudden access without wisdom. God is not careless with his servants. He sequences favor. He releases it in stages so that increase doesn't crush what he's building. And because you've already proven that you can handle small things with integrity, you're being trusted with larger things through alignment. Chosen one, you are not being elevated to impress people. You are being positioned to influence outcomes. There is a difference. One feeds ego, the other fulfills assignment. Stay aware of that distinction. Keep your spirit soft. Keep your ears open. Keep your heart surrendered. The same God who guided you into that encounter will guide you through what comes next. You don't need to chase proximity. Proximity is chasing you. You don't need to force doors. Doors are being unlocked for you. And you don't need to announce your arrival. The oil will announce you before you speak. This is the season where your consistency becomes visible, where your obedience becomes tangible, where your kindness becomes currency. Let the process unfold. Let the conversations happen without your interference. Let the favor mature, because when it manifests fully, it will not only bless you, it will stabilize you. It will fund what God placed in your heart long ago, and it will do so without compromising who you are. Remain faithful, remain humble, remain ready, because what heaven started with a quiet act of kindness is now being completed with deliberate alignment. And alignment, chosen one, always leads to increase that cannot be reversed. Chosen one. There is something profound you need to recognize about what just happened, because the encounter you experienced was not only about who you helped, but about who you proved yourself to be when no reward was guaranteed. Many people are kind when there is visibility, when the return is obvious, when the benefit is clear. But very few remain consistent when there is nothing to gain. That distinction matters in the unseen realm. Heaven is always watching how you treat people when you think it doesn't matter. What you encountered was not just a person testing the world. It was humanity being tested through you. Some people of great influence intentionally move through spaces appearing ordinary, unremarkable, even inconvenient. Not because they enjoy deception, but because they are searching for something real in a world saturated with performance. When you met them, they weren't looking for charm, intelligence, or charisma. They were watching for dignity. They were watching for how you treat someone you believe has no leverage. You passed that test without effort because it's who you are. You didn't adjust your tone. You didn't withhold respect. You didn't rush past them. You didn't dismiss them as unimportant. You met them with the same humanity you offer anyone. And that consistency is rare. That consistency is what revealed your character, not your ambition, not your hunger, your heart. I've walked through moments where I didn't realize I was being observed until much later. Times when I thought I was simply being patient, simply being decent, simply being present. Only to discover later that those moments were quietly noted by people who had the power to change outcomes. That's when I learned something that changed how I move through life. You are always on assignment, even when you don't feel anointed. Chosen one. This is why you must never minimize who you are on your hardest days. Your worst days still carry oil. Your tired days still carry authority. Your quiet days still speak. The person you encountered saw that. They didn't see perfection. They saw authenticity. And authenticity is what people with influence trust most, because it can't be manufactured. This is also why the return will not feel transactional. You didn't flatter them, you didn't posture, you didn't perform. So the response won't be pity or charity. It will be investment. When someone with resources finds integrity, they invest in it because they know how rare it is. They've seen talent fail. They've seen brilliance collapse. But character endures. I want you to prepare your heart for this truth.